In a world of horror games often built on jump scares, the Little Nightmares series carved out a special place for itself by delivering a deep psychological horror. This work of art, which relies on dreadful silence rather than loud screams, has a fascinating story behind its creation. The formation of this Little Nightmare is a tale of a creative, independent idea that grew into one of the most iconic games in the horror genre. It all began in 2014 with a raw concept at the Swedish developer Tarsier Studios. The studio, which had already proven its capabilities working on the Little Big Planet series, decided to showcase its own independent identity with a new game titled Hunger. The project's initial trailer laid the foundation for everything that would later become Little Nightmares, a lonely child in a yellow raincoat navigating a vast, misshapen world, grotesque, human-like monsters, and a heavy atmosphere that perfectly conveyed a sense of helplessness. This dark and unique vision caught the attention of major publisher Bandai Namco. With their support, the Hunger project was renamed Little Nightmares and entered full development. The developer's core philosophy was to recreate the fears of childhood, a time when the world seems massive, unknown, and threatening. To achieve this, the art team designed a world resembling a filthy, distorted dollhouse. All the objects and characters were exaggerated in scale, towering over the protagonist to make the player constantly feel small and vulnerable. This feeling was reinforced by the gameplay mechanics. In this game, you aren't a powerful hero. You are a defenseless child whose only means of survival are to run, hide, and use your wits to solve puzzles. The complete lack of weapons or combat abilities ensured that tension was present in every single moment. Another key element that helped shape the game's identity was its sound design and the complete absence of dialogue. The entire story and all emotions are conveyed purely through visuals, character body language, and environmental audio. The sound of a monster dragging its feet down a hallway, the dripping of water in a deathly silence, and even the tiny footsteps of the main character all became part of a symphony of terror designed to immerse the player.
Welcome back. The franchise we are reviewing this time is Little Nightmares.
Little Nightmares. Release 2017. Meta 83. Release platforms: PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, Nintendo Switch. Cost unknown. Sell 20 million copies for Little Nightmares 1 and 2. Playtime: main story 3 hours, main plus extras 5 hours, completionist 9 hours. In 2017, Tarsier Studios released Little Nightmares, an artistic puzzle platformer. The game followed a path that had already been perfected by Playdead's masterpiece, Inside, telling a complete story without using a single word of dialogue. Entering such an arena and being forced to live in the shadow of such a giant was a massive risk. So the question is, how did Little Nightmares manage to step out of that shadow and establish its own powerful identity? The entire narrative weight of Little Nightmares rests on its visual and environmental elements. Although this core approach is similar to Inside, Little Nightmares quickly charts its own course. While Inside depicted a cold, dystopian sci-fi atmosphere, the world of Little Nightmares is a grotesque, quasi-fantasy nightmare. The game places you in the role of Six, trapped in a place called the Mall, which feels more like a dark fairy tale than a modern dystopia. This distinction in visual identity is the game's greatest success. The silence and environmental storytelling don't create a scientific mystery. They build a deep, psychological horror that feels entirely unique. Gameplay is a combination of 3 elements: platforming, puzzles, and stealth. The platforming involves standard mechanics, but its execution isn't always smooth. The controls can feel stiff and imprecise at times. This becomes a noticeable weakness during chase sequences that demand quick reflexes and it can lead to frustrating trial and error in certain stages. The game's puzzles are often physics-based and follow a reasonable logic, but they rarely evolve beyond a few repeating patterns. The stealth segments, however, are where the game generates its most tension. The enemy designs are unique and perfectly match the game's bizarre atmosphere, and encountering them creates incredibly stressful moments. That said, the enemy AI is relatively simple and predictable. After a while, getting past them becomes more of a timing challenge than a dynamic stealth experience. Technically, the game uses Unreal Engine 4 to deliver impressive visuals, particularly in its lighting. In the complete absence of dialogue, the sound design becomes vital, and it perfectly serves the atmosphere and conveys the sense of danger. Ultimately, Little Nightmares is a brilliant example of taking inspiration the right way. While it used the wordless narrative formula made famous by titles like Inside, it succeeded by relying on exceptional art direction, a completely different world, and a focus on a different kind of horror. It forged its own independent and unforgettable identity. And although the game has its weaknesses in gameplay, it was completely successful in its primary mission, escaping the shadow of its peers and establishing itself as a special cult classic. Little Nightmares 2, release 2021, meta 83, release platforms PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, Nintendo Switch, cost unknown, sell 20 million copies for Little Nightmares 1 and 2. Playtime, main story 5 hours, main plus extras 6 hours, completionist 9 hours. After the unexpected success of Little Nightmares, Tarsier Studios faced a daunting task. How do you expand on a self-contained, nightmarish experience without losing the unique identity that made it so special? Their answer was Little Nightmares 2, a sequel that is more ambitious, larger in scope, and mechanically more complex. By introducing a new protagonist and an AI companion, the game challenges the formula of the original. But did these changes actually improve the overall experience, or did they just add unnecessary complications? The first and most significant distinction in Little Nightmares 2 is the narrative shift from isolation to companionship. This time, we play as Mono, who is joined on his journey by Six, the protagonist of the first game. This partnership is the core of the sequel's identity. While the first game focused on the horror of absolute loneliness, Little Nightmares 2 finds its horror in a merciless world where the only glimmer of hope is the presence of a companion. This two-person dynamic adds a new emotional layer to the wordless story, shifting the atmosphere from the suffocating dread of the maw to the somber melancholy of the vast, pale city. The gameplay still rests on the three pillars of platforming, puzzles, and stealth, but each has been modified. The companion mechanic with Six is implemented brilliantly. She never becomes a burden. Instead, she intelligently assists in solving puzzles and moves dynamically through the environment. Many of the game's puzzles are now designed around the cooperation of these two characters, giving them more depth compared to the first game. However, the biggest and most controversial change is the addition of a rudimentary combat system. In certain sections, Mono can pick up objects like hammers or pipes to fight back against smaller enemies. While this mechanic could have theoretically created a sense of empowerment and variety, its execution is stiff and imprecise. The heavy controls and difficult timing of the attacks often lead to unfair deaths that are more frustrating than tense, breaking the fluid rhythm of stealth and escape. From an artistic and technical standpoint, Little Nightmares 2 is a noticeable improvement over its predecessor. The environments of the Pale City are far more diverse and expansive than the repetitive corridors of the Maw, taking us from a horrifying school with a terrifying teacher to an abandoned hospital filled with living mannequins. The new enemy designs are, as always, creative and nightmarish. In the end, Little Nightmares 2 is a worthy and successful sequel that intelligently expanded its world. By focusing on the companion mechanic, it carved out an identity completely independent of the first game and delivered a more mature narrative and atmospheric experience. However, this ambition was not without its costs. The addition of the combat system feels like a miscalculation that hurts the overall cohesion of the gameplay. Despite this, Little Nightmares 2 remains a powerful work of art in the horror genre, whose successes far outweigh its flaws.
Don't forget like and subscribe. Thanks.
Little Nightmares 3. Release 2025. Meta 72. Release platforms PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, PC, Nintendo, Switch 1 and 2. Cost unknown. Sell unknown. Playtime main story 8 hours, main plus extras 9 hours, completionist 11 hours. Following 2 acclaimed entries, Tarsier Studios, the series' original creator, chose a new path. After being acquired by Embracer Group, they officially announced they would be stepping away from the franchise to focus on creating entirely new worlds and IPs that they themselves would own. Since the Little Nightmares brand remained with the publisher, Bandai Namco, the task of developing this anticipated sequel was entrusted to Supermassive Games. Supermassive Games is a studio renowned in the horror space, famous for crafting cinematic, story-driven horror games. Their portfolio includes celebrated titles like Until Dawn, 2015, The Quarry, and the entire Dark Pictures anthology. This sequel takes the companionship concept from the second game and evolves it into the central game mechanic. The second game was a purely single-player experience. Although the player, as Mono, had an AI companion, Six, by their side, this partnership was mostly narrative and atmospheric. Six would automatically assist in simple puzzles, like giving the player a boost, but the main challenges and full control rested with the player. The gameplay focused on the horror of being alone with a companion in a merciless world. In contrast, Little Nightmares 3 is designed from the ground up as a full 2-player co-op game. It builds its core gameplay on the active cooperation between 2 players, Aslo and alone. This change completely transforms the puzzle design. We're no longer dealing with solo challenges where an AI lends a small hand. Instead, the puzzles depend entirely on the coordination and complementary tools of the 2 characters. Each has a unique item, like Lo's bow and Alone's wrench, and players are forced to communicate and work together to progress. And yet, these very changes are the primary reason for the mixed reactions from critics and players. Supermassive's more cinematic approach sometimes allows the constant, subtle, creeping dread, which was Tarsier's signature, to be replaced by pre-scripted moments and jump scares. In its attempt to evolve, the game has lost some of the artistic minimalism and simplicity that made the first 2 entries feel so unique. Ultimately, Little Nightmares 3 is a complicated sequel to judge. It is a high-quality, well-crafted co-op horror experience that is absolutely worth playing on its own merits. Its main problem isn't its quality, but the immense challenge of following 2 masterpieces while simultaneously changing the core formula. The drop in scores doesn't signify a failure. It signifies a change in direction that simply didn't resonate with part of the community. It may not be the best Little Nightmares game, but it is a new and valuable chapter in this dark universe.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, support the channel by liking and subscribing. See you. Goodbye.